The Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities of Ecuador, CONAIE, expressed its willingness to dialogue with the national government while ratifying the continuity of the national strike. In Colombia, a fire in the Tuluá prison in the department of Valle del Cauca left 52 dead and over 41. And on Tuesday, the Israeli parliament unanimously approved a draft bill to dissolve the legislative body, a key step that pushes the country closer towards its fifth election in less than 4 years. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. The Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities of Ecuador, CONAIE, expressed its willingness to dialogue with the national government while ratifying the continuity of the national strike. The President of the National Assembly, Virgilio Saquicela, confirmed that the parties will meet again at 9:00 a.m. local time after the first meeting with the government's representatives ended out without progress. During the first round of talks, the President of the CONAIE, Leonidas Salazar, asked for the removal of the interior and government ministers. Despite of the willingness to dialogue, he said that the national strike is maintained because of the substantial issues are not resolved. CONAIE completes 17 days of protest, demanding a 10-point list related to fuel price reduction, economic relief, employment, education, and labor rights. Leonidas Issa, the president of the Indigenous Confederation of Ecuador, pointed out that after a long day of dialogue between authorities of the native peoples and representatives of the executive, that most of the issues raised at the talks were not solved. Among the government's failures to comply with the request, Issa highlighted the request for the protection of the indigenous lands from mining and the oil and respect of the guarantees to the right to protest.
As a result of the struggle, there are many who have been criminalized, many who at this moment are already undergoing trial. Therefore, no one has gone out to fight for vandalism, at least from us. If this process should be clean without any comrade in this case that is currently penalized for the social protests, I do ask you, Mr. President of the Republic, Minister, that we stop this situation, stop the racism, stop the hatred. And I believe that Mr. Carrillo is not a guarantee for our democracy.
In that sense, Issa pointed out that in view of the President Lazo's call to violence and the lack of commitment to the demands, the Assembly will discuss the next decisions to be made.
The President was clear, with all the violence attached to his words. But we would have liked him to be here. We would have liked him to be here. But he has not really had the courage to say what he said yesterday at the press conference. Therefore, we hope that with all these issues that have not been solved, we really have to consult. All the leaders are here, and we will. And we really would have liked that at this table, on the agreements, on the public issues, we would have liked to tell the country, to tell the world, comrades, we've made progress, and we need to be able to put down our actions. But in this case, with the substantial points, we cannot, and there we have to make a decision with our comrades.
And the Ministry of Health of Peru confirmed this Sunday the first case of monkeypox in the country. It is about a foreign citizen between 35 and 40 years old, resident in Lima, whose identity is kept in reserve. The case was detected on Saturday, and according to the report, he is at home in isolation with his family because his clinical condition is stable. Due to its spread, Peru has an epidemiological alert in force since May 20th in order to prevent its transmission. On Tuesday, the Honduran people marked the 13th anniversary of the coup against former President Manuel Zelaya. The party Liberty and Refoundation honored the date with a series of activities, such as the debates and the analysis of the 2009 events. Likewise, a forum was held at the Presidential Palace with the presence of social leaders, authorities, and former heads of state from Latin America. On June 28, 2009, Manuel Zelaya was ousted by a parliamentary coup promoted by the conservative sectors of the country, after the former president's attempt to modify the constitution to benefit the people. In Argentina, hundreds of women protested in front of the United States Embassy in rejection of the decision to outlaw abortion in that country. Members of the National Campaign for Legal, Safe and Free Abortion, together with political parties and feminist organizations, rejected the abrogation by the U.S. Supreme Court of the historic 1973 Roe v. Wade ruling, which recognized the constitutional right of women to abortion. After a march that covered several blocks, demonstrators read a document in front of the United States Embassy in which they expressed their support to the women of the North American country and warned about the dangerous precedent that the ruling created.
We consider that what happened in the United States, that is, this ruling after 50 years, which takes away the possibility for American women to continue interrupting their pregnancies, is a total injustice and a disgrace to women's human rights.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. In Colombia, a fire in the Tuluá prison in the department of Valle del Cauca left 52 dead and over 40 wounded. The event happened in an attempted escape and fight in the middle of a guard change during early hours of Tuesday morning. The block where the emergency occurred had about 200 inmates, a reason for which the authorities expect the number of injured and fatalities to increase. Fire department authorities also reported that their fire was under control and that about 50 people were transferred to assistance centers near the penitentiary facility. In Colombia also, the Truth Commission presents its final report that explains the patterns and the persistence of the armed conflict in the country. The report will be presented at the Jorge Eliezer Gaitán Theater in Bogotá. During the presentation ceremony, only one of the 10 chapters will be presented, the synthesis and findings obtained by the Commission during this work. This chapter also contains proposals as starting points for a national dialogue to address the causes of the conflict. It suggests specific measures to prevent and never repeat the cruelty of war. Likewise, it seeks to contribute to the clarification of the infractions committed and to offer a broad explanation of their complexity to the society in order to provide dignity to the victims and to have a real impact on the Colombian population in general. From Venezuela, President Nicolás Maduro Moros announced a new rapprochement with the United States government during the presentation of the Simón Bolívar 2022 National Journalism Award in its 80th edition. On the occasion of the 204th anniversary of the first publication in 1818 of the newspaper Correo del Orinoco, founded by the liberator Simón Bolívar as an artillery of a thought to combat the imperialist Spanish press. The Venezuelan president reported on the arrival of the country of a delegation sent by the government of the United States with a view to continuing the talks on the bilateral agenda that began last March.
An important delegation from the United States government arrived in Venezuela 2 hours ago, and it is currently working to follow up on the talks that began on March the 5th, and to continue with the bilateral agenda between the government of the United States and the government of Venezuela. I spoke with the President of the Assembly, Jorge Rodriguez, who at this time, exactly at this time, is meeting with the delegation. And we continue discussing several issues.
Authorities in the southern United States state of Texas found 46 people dead inside a tractor-trailer truck in what appears to be the deadliest human smuggling case in modern U.S. history. San Antonio Fire Chief Charles Hood told reporters another 16 people were taken to the hospital for treatment of heat-related injuries, including 4 children. The truck was found next to the railroad tracks in a remote area on the southern outskirts of San Antonio. High temperatures in the city topped 39 degrees Celsius with high humidity. According to San Antonio Police Chief William McManus, 3 people were taken into custody following the discovery.
I am Councilwoman Rocha Garcia, District 4. We are very saddened tonight by what happened. 46 people died today here in a truck. We took 16 people to different hospitals in the area, including 4 children. We would like to remind you this is a federal investigation.
Now we move on to other topics. Authorities of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic reported on Monday that the remains of 172 Ukrainian soldiers were found at the Azovstal steel plant. The finding is in addition to the discovery of the remains of the Ukrainian servicemen buried in the Petrovsky Park of Mariupol during the liberation of the city on May 20th. The prosecutor's office also said that its investigators, together with the Russian Investigation Committee, found a list of those buried in the site, which allowed to identify them. The prosecutor's office also pointed out that the Ministries of Emergency Situations and Internal Affairs of Donetsk continue to examine the city of Mariupol's territory. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said Russia will export gold to other markets despite the plans by G7 leaders of banning its trade. According to Peskov, the measure will only force to redirect Russia's gold exports to other markets, where the product is in high demand and where there are more friendly legal and economic regimes. This decision was prompted by the measure announced this past Sunday, June 26, by several Western leaders who said that the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, and Japan plan to ban imports of Russian gold. The decision was labeled by the Russian authorities as illegitimate. The Russian official recalled that the market of precious metals is a global one, quite wide and diverse, so that this measure will not truly affect Russia. Now we address other topics. China on Tuesday announced adjustment to its COVID-19 prevention and control protocol that will make shorten the quarantine time for inbound travelers and close contacts of the infected. The new 9th version of the COVID-19 protocol sticks to the general strategies of guarding against imported cases and preventing COVID-19 resurgences at home and dynamic zero-COVID approach, but included some changes compared with the previous 8th version. The isolation period for inbound travelers and the close contacts of COVID-19 cases will be shortened. The new protocol designates risk areas as high, medium, and low-risk ones based on the epidemic situation in the specific area and implements corresponding restrictive measures. Lastly, the frequency of nucleic acid tests for high-risk occupational groups will be increased.
The isolation time for close contacts of COVID-19 cases and inbound travelers will be adjusted from the regime of 14 days and concentrated quarantine plus 7 days in home isolation to 7 days in concentrated quarantine plus 3 days in home isolation. The quarantine regime for the secondary close contacts will be changed from 7 days in concentrated quarantine to 7 days in home isolation.
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back from the South. On Tuesday, the Israeli parliament unanimously approved a draft bill to dissolve legislative body, a key step that pushes the country closer towards its fifth election in less than 4 years. Members of the Prime Minister Naftali Bennett's outgoing coalition and the opposition led by the ex-premier Benjamin Netanyahu have been arguing in Israel's parliament, the Knesset, since last week over a dissolution bill. Netanyahu and its allies have been holding talks seeking to form a new government within the current parliament, which will avert new elections. The sides have traded legislative consultations but finally agreed to advance a bill that will be as law by the end of the Wednesday. According to the bill, Parliament will dissolve with new elections to be held on October 25th or November 1st. A crane loading chlorine tanks onto a ship in Jordan's port of Aqaba dropped one of them, causing a huge explosion of toxic yellow smoke that killed 13 people and injured more than 250. According to the latest toll update, around 123 people remained in the hospital on Tuesday. Some of them were in critical condition. Chlorine is a widely used disinfectant and water purification agent, but if inhaled, the gas turns into hydrochloric acid, which can lead to internal burning and drowning through a reactionary release of water in the lungs. Following the incident, the authorities advised residents of Aqaba City to stay inside and close the windows and doors as a precaution. Moreover, the Civil Defense Department sent specialist teams to the port to deal with the leak and clean up operation. Negotiations between Iran and world powers on reviving the 2015 nuclear deal resumed this Tuesday in the Qatari capital of Doha, with mediation by the European Union after the talks broke down in March. Tehran's chief negotiator Ali Bagheri Khani attended the negotiations on behalf of the Iranian government. On the other hand, Robert Walley was the United States special envoy present in the talks. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was designed to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons and impose strict limits on its nuclear activity in return for an easing of the U.S. and international economic sanctions. But the former president, Donald Trump, pulled the U.S. out of the deal in 2018, reimposed the sanctions, and introduced hundreds of additional sanctions on the Middle East country.
I confirm that we reached an agreement, but it remains to be seen whether the U.S. government can, according to the plan, stop following the Trump administration's from the responsible party. Iran has committed to participate in the talks and to try and resolve the remaining issues from the previous negotiations at the possible time.
China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson urged the North Atlantic Treaty Organization to stop its Cold War mentality and the provocative remarks against the Asian giant.
China's development is an opportunity for the world. It's not we urge NATO to immediately stop spreading groundless and provocative remarks against China. What NATO should do is to abandon its Cold War mentality, zero-sum game and practices of creating enemies. After messing up Europe, NATO should not try to mess up Asia and the whole world as well.
A United Nations committee called on Morocco and Spain to investigate the recent fatalities of more than 20 migrants at the border between the two countries. The United Nations Committee on Migrant Workers asked the government of Rabat and Madrid to investigate immediately and completely the causes of the death of 23 sub-Saharan migrants who took part in a massive attempt to cross from Morocco to the Spanish city of Melilla. The international body reported that it remains to be established whether the victims died when they fell from the border fence in the stampede or as a result of any reaction or action of the border agents. Now we move on to other topics. At least one person has been killed and 10 others injured after a rare tornado hit the town of Zierkezigze in the Netherlands. The Zealand Safety Region, which is coordinating rescue efforts, said there was a huge deployment of emergency services in response to the extreme weather incident, which also saw a ship run into trouble off the coast, caught in the high winds. Dutch media reported that the tornado ripped the roofs from a number of homes and caused other property damage. The Weerline Meteorological Service described the event as a weak tornado, one of only 2 or 3 which form in the Netherlands each year. One of the worst tornadoes to hit the country happened back in June 1967, when 7 people were killed and dozens injured.
The Netherlands happened back in June 19.
During the closing press conference of the Group of 7 summit, leaders agreed to create a climate club by the end of the year that will allow willing nations to coordinate and speed up efforts to tackle global climate.
We will not lose sight of the long-term duties. We want to make progress towards a just world and assume global responsibility. This applies, for example, to climate protection. That is why we have discussed the issue of a climate club here, which I have been proposing for a long time, and I am therefore pleased that we have agreed here in Elmau to establish such a club by the end of the year. We have laid the foundations for this project, we have defined the challenges and agreed on the next steps to be taken.
So we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.